The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's Bryan, Miss Berlin, and Mr. Betcher for Breaking Down Security.
Hello.
Hey.
Hey, we took a week off for everybody who didn't notice. Well, obviously they noticed because our listens and downloads on Libsyn went down quite a bit. Everybody must be caught up or something. I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, we're back this week. We have a very interesting guest. We'll bring him on here in a couple of seconds. Miss Berlin, Mr. Betcher, how are you this week?
Pretty great.
Doing good.
Yeah? Very cool. Yeah. I started Monday off at 8 a.m. Going to a pharmacy to get my second shot, and hoping that I didn't get knocked the F out like everyone said it was going to happen on Twitter. But no, I don't know if it's because my immune system is what it is, but I had some soreness in my arm and a little fatigue, but
I thought I was going to be able to will my body, because I just told it as I was like, you got this, like just telling myself and amping it should listen to me, because that's my, and didn't.
Yeah.
I could feel my bones touching each other.
Ew.
For 2 days.
I don't like needles. I can blame the Navy for that. When I went to boot camp, they had this thing called the shotgun, which is like a needle that's about this thick. It's about the size of a broomstick or something. And they did something, but it was like 6 shots in both your arm, 3 shots in each arm, and it's like, yeah, don't tense up, you'll bleed like stuck pig. And with all the stress and everything there, I've just had kind of a needle aversion ever since. So I like to use this stuff, which is lidocaine, 5% lidocaine. I rubbed a little bit on both arms just in case Nurse Ratched wanted to hook me up with a needle on the other arm, and it numbs that area quite well, so I didn't even feel the needle going in. So got mine.
The needle's very small.
Well, you went through birth multiple times, so that's not a problem for you. A little prick in your arm is not a problem for you. So
Yeah, I know they're running all over the place here.
No. Oh my goodness. Well, I set that one up. I hope I set that one up for you. Yeah. Now the interesting thing is getting everyone else so that we can open up. One of the things that our governor here in Washington is trying to do is if everybody is 70% or better in terms of inoculation, they'll reopen the state. And if they do that, it'll make it a lot easier for us to have our conference at the end of August.
So question.
Go ahead.
That 70%, that includes kids, right? Like 3-year-olds who, come on.
No.
If you say,
I think it's
maybe,
I think it's percent of people that can get it.
Right. Yeah. And depending on which county you live in Washington, it varies widely. We have some folks in certain counties that don't want to get theirs. So I don't know if it's an aggregate or what, but we're hoping that it will open up by June 30th enough where, we'll be able to do things like we normally did 2 years ago for InfoSec Camp Out. So cross y'all's fingers for that. Miss Berlin is still planning on driving up here for that. What's that? What's that face, Miss Berlin? What's that face?
I'm sorry, I have to go to BlueToothCon.
No, you don't. You said you could just phone it in.
I thought I could, but I cannot.
Wow.
I'm sorry.
Wow.
Any chance you can move the date?
No.
Oh, fine.
No, it's okay. We'll figure something out. On another news, apparently there's now an opening on the BreakSec podcast for a new host. So Miss Berlin's going to be leaving us now. No, I'm just kidding.
I've contemplated trying to do both. We'll see.
No, it's all good. Don't put yourself out if we're going to do this, because it's like, all we need is some bad internet connection at the campsite, and it's just going to go, pear-shaped. So, you've been on our planning meetings, trying, me sitting around at a campsite monitoring a Discord to make sure that people aren't being ugly is just not what we're going to be doing. So we won't have a virtual component on this, but anyway, so we'll burn that bridge when we get to it. We've got some folks up here that, we can do talks for, or we can, do some contests or like, extreme camping or something like that. So we've got things that we can do. So, I think we bring our guest on because we've been talking to him prior to the show, and then we're having our little tete-a-tete here back and forth. He's been on the show before, and I have taken his classes in OSINT. Saw him. I think the last time we had him on, I interviewed him at DerbyCon right after he won the SECTF, which is no mean feat. Of course, you all know by now you're yelling, it's Joe Gray. And Joe Gray, hey, welcome to the show.
How are you now?
Doing all right. It's going. We have people who are about to mow their lawn, so I'm going to have to shut my window at some point. But I'm glad to have you on. I'm glad you were able to make it. I know you had some flat tire issues somewhere, but you're able to come on. For folks that don't necessarily know who you are because, they're, not in the US or they don't follow social engineering, circles here in the InfoSec world, tell them a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So by day, I'm a senior investigator at SpyCloud. I just started that position. Beyond that, I am the founder, principal instructor, and sole content developer for the OSINTION, spelled the OSINT ion, pronounced like Ascension. With that, I do a lot of various open source intelligence training. Beyond that, as Bryan said, I am the 2017 DerbyCon Social Engineering Capture the Flag winner, as well as the 2019 Hackfest Quebec runner-up, despite not speaking any French besides parlez-vous anglais. In addition to that, I've competed in quite a few OSINT CTFs. My team is the Password Inspection Agency. We've gotten the top 5 numerous times, and despite DEF CON being canceled last year with the virtual DEF CON, we actually won the Trace Labs OSINT Search Party Missing Person CTF at DEF CON last year.
Nice.
So I do a lot of the stuff competitively, but it is also my day job. Basically, I think a fanatic might be an understatement for how I feel about OSINT specifically, but pretty much any form of intelligence that has some sort of open source slant to it. Beyond that, I've got my book coming out, Practical Social Engineering. I'm definitely more involved in OSINT anymore than I am social engineering, but the two do definitely have quite a bit of overlay if we decided to make a Venn diagram out of them to express all of the advanced, persistent, next generation single pane of glass synergies.
Bingo.
Yeah, there we go.
Got that.
Anybody who had their bingo card, somebody better be yelling bingo.
Right. Yep. So your book is available on No Starch and Amazon. There's a link in the show notes. If you go to No Starch, they have a pre-order code right now. So if you're interested until around August 24th, 2021. So if you're listening to this in the future, you can just go to No Starch using the link in the show notes to get your copy of the book. And if you get a book from No Starch, it comes in a PDF format as well. So we wanted to have you on to talk about some of the OSINTION stuff. I think I had wanted to have you on after I took the missing persons class with you. What made you want to? So missing persons is sometimes looking for those folks is sometimes a good thing, sometimes a bad thing. As you mentioned during your lecture with us, some of these people disappear because they want to disappear, not because they forcefully are disappeared. Why do you see the need to go and look for those folks? Maybe not even knowing the context of why they disappeared. Do you always assume that they've been forcefully disappeared, or that they want to disappear?
I try to avoid that specific assumption because, as you stated, some people are willingly missing, some people are not. Some people want to be found, some people don't. Some people can be found, some people cannot. Basically, I created that course after competing in my very first Trace Labs event. And I was like, there's a lot of techniques with this. And I had already been having a lot of conversations with like Robert Sell, who is one of the founders of Trace Labs. He's a creep in their Slack. I believe his Twitter handle is Robert E. Sell. And then I'd had conversations with Blackbeard, James, or Adrian Korn, AK-47 Intel. I think their Twitter handles are the same as their Slack handles. I had a lot of conversations with them about some of the quality of some of the stuff that had been submitted and how we could improve it from time to time. And I was like, well, hey, you know, I'm thinking about doing a course. And they're like, okay, let's see what you got. So I strung together a 4-hour course. It was just, you know, a basic course, duct tape and a prayer, if you will. I got a go to training license. I put it out there. I don't even remember what I charged. I think it was pretty close to, I think it was like 10, somewhere between 10 and $50. It wasn't very expensive. And we did it and people were like, this is really cool. So then I started to offer it more and more. And then as I offered it and I developed new techniques while I was competing, or I had read about other people with some of the ways that they would go about it, I'd be like, okay, well, they do it this way. I could do it this way. Let's put it in there. And then the course grew to 6 hours. And then almost immediately thereafter grew to 8 hours just because of the amount of material. I mean, some of the feedback I get after people take the 8-hour course is they're afraid that their ears are going to pop off because of the amount of some of the information that just gets crammed in their head. Because I mean, in teaching the course, it's one of those things where I have the ability to influence and advance the field of OSINT, to start that passion for somebody, somebody who may be working right now in threat intelligence, or they may be in law enforcement and they want to move into InfoSec, or as they would refer to it, cyber, something to that effect. So it can spur the passion, but at the same time, for the most part, it is OSINT for good, at least on the Trace Lab side of things. And to the point that you were making about some people, they don't want to be found, that is something I do struggle with, but I kind of allow myself to sleep at night through thinking about those around them, their loved ones, in the regard of, I put myself in their shoes. And if I had a family member or a loved one that went missing and nobody could find them, and all of a sudden they're found and they say, hey, you know, we want nothing to do with you. I went missing because you're ugly, your breath stinks, you wear flip-flops at the wrong time of the year, and I hate your musical choice, right? Pretty much all the things that would be like a kill shot to me.
I
if
feel
they said
attacked.
that, hey, I mean, birds of a feather, you know, or should we say seagulls from the same nest there, shipmate.
There you go. Yeah.
But, you know, I would at least have some sort of closure in saying, you know, okay, it hurts that this person doesn't want anything to do with me, but at least I know they're safe.
Right.
And that's kind of the part that helps me personally sleep at night. There are other organizations that do leverage the people OSINT concepts, not necessarily in the same vein as, say, Trace Labs, because organizations, I don't have affiliation with Innocent Lives Foundation, but there's definitely a heavy OSINT element there, and that's all about people.
Right.
National Child Protection Task Force is another. To some degree, Operation Safe Escape has some stuff going on. Operation Underground Railroad, Anti-Human Trafficking Intelligence Initiative. And as you can tell, the theme with most of those either deals with human trafficking, domestic abuse, child porn, or getting children out of bad situations. Right. So all of those they're really dark, and at times they can be very, very heavy on the heart and very heavy just to deal with in general, as a person. But at the same time, that type of OSINT is truly OSINT for good. And that's really how I try to frame most of the types of investigations I do. Some of the other stuff I've done on the people OSINT side, working with public-ish figures to understand what's out there about them so that they can take steps to mitigate information that's there that they can't make go away. And in some cases, just go through and opt out of everything they can to minimize their presence. So there's reasons people may do that. There's reasons people may avoid doing that. But on the people side, that's a lot of really the really good side of OSINT. And obviously for every yin, there's a yang, and there's the other side that's not quite so great.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Like,
so
I guess what crosses my mind for that kind of stuff is in the case of people not wanting to be found, what is there anything that you can do to make sure they don't want to be found because of some kind of abuse? Like, would it not even be a possibility that you would do the project just because like there's a restraining order or something?
If I were aware of something like that, I personally would step away from it. In the case of like Trace Labs events, like the OSINT Search Party, formerly known as the Missing Person CTF, that's always in cooperation with law enforcement. And with that, they reach out to various law enforcement partners that they have and say, give us your missing people. They crowdsource all the intel. After the competition's over, they deduplicate it and they pass it off to them. So that's something I may not be aware of. But I've never been in that particular situation. But I would say that if I were, that's probably one of the things that would warrant me to hop into the Trace Labs Slack and probably send a direct message to Trace Labs management being like, hey, are you aware of this? And more than likely, it wouldn't change the fact that anything would, in terms of the competition, everything would pretty much still stay the same. But it would at least let them be aware of it. I've never came across anything where someone's talked about restraining orders or found them using any of the OSINT techniques, going through things like Judy records or something like that, which paid tools are not authorized in the competition. So you couldn't use something like Pacer. Judy records is about as close as you're going to get. But with that being said, if I came across something like that, that would definitely be something worth running up the flagpole.
Yeah, but since it's with the working with law enforcement, I mean, it would be
precisely
right.
Well, law enforcement should be aware of it, but at the same time, they could be missing from, like, for example, in the class I taught yesterday, the way I teach the classes, and Bryan can attest to this, the first 6 hours of the class, that's all lectures, labs, demos, all that stuff. And I've actually built out, since Bryan took the course, I've actually added more formal labs using Try Hack Me now. But the final 2 hours, everybody in the class teams up together and we look for a missing person. And I pull them off of the NamUs website. In doing so, there's a few mitigations that I put in place to make sure that, we respect the people's privacy, their PI and what have you. But one of the people we were looking for yesterday, they were listed as missing out of one county in Texas, but they actually live 2 counties over. So it could be one of those situations where the 2 agencies may not interact with each other. There could be a lack of due diligence, depending on workload and, basically just the attitude of whoever's filing the paperwork or whatever. So it is a possibility that something like that could come up, and it would definitely be worth bringing up. But I've personally never seen it. If I were doing it in like a standalone investigation, that's definitely one of my first things to check. Hey, this person's want me to find this other person. Why do they want me to find them? What do they want me to find about them? And then from there, is there anything that would make this person that they were wanting to find not want the other person to find them?
Yeah. So one of the things that happened to me in the last few weeks, because of the pandemic and everything, I had a friend of mine. I have this kind of a story time, but I had a friend of mine, very influential in my early years in the Navy in Monterey. He was a senior E5 or second class, and I was just an E1 nothing, from right out of boot camp. And he was a mentor. We hung out a lot in San Diego after I got back from Diego, and he was in Bahrain and he got married. And, you know, it had been a few years since I had seen him. It was almost 20 years, as a matter of fact, since he'd retired and got out of the Navy. And I was actually friends with his wife on Facebook, but I didn't have any information. She didn't post to Facebook. There was a couple of pictures of him from like the mid 2010s or something. I was trying to find Matt, and, you know, I just didn't want to call him out of the blue and go, hey, you know, because I had a phone number for him, but it was obviously old. And, you know, I was trying to figure out what I could do to reach out to him, but without like feeling stalkery. So I actually physically wrote a letter, put a couple of pictures in it and sent it to him. But you know, we talked about some of this during that class. It was like, you know, how far ethically do you go on this? And I had, you know, it wasn't hard for me to find where he lived after a while. I actually had the address of the command that he and I were in Monterey. You know, there are numerous websites out there like White Pages and those that'll actually keep your, you know, last, you know, 8, 9, 10 addresses. So it wasn't hard for me to find him. I knew his approximate age. You know, and I knew what his wife's name was because we were friends on Facebook together. And it wasn't hard to find that he had moved to Tennessee. I found, you know, things on Facebook where he had bought a brand new house in the last 5 months. He bought a car at a place in Tennessee that was, you know, in December. So I knew what kind of car he was driving. But, you know, I actually looked on Google Maps at his house and I was like, oh, look, he's got lakefront property, you know, and oh, he's, you know, he lives, you know, so far away from every place. And at that point I was like, well, okay, I have his address, I have his phone number, but just to call him out of the blue would be like a little weird. So I actually, like I said, wrote him a note and mailed it to him. And then I got a phone call and he was like, hey, you know, how'd you find me? And I was like, well, you weren't hard to find because, you know, it's 2021 and nobody thinks about this kind of stuff. So he sent me a letter back, but we had a good phone call and everything. And I mean, Google Maps was about as far as I felt like I could ethically go. I'm sure there's other people who would take it even further, you know, to find out if, you know, he's been involved, you know, 'cause some of these services you pay $4.95 or something, you can get like more information. But I was actually comparing, you know, 2 different sites that would give you like, you know, the last 4 of his phone number and the other one gave you first 4 of his phone number. But is the ethical line for, you know, me finding my shipmate from the Navy versus, you know, somebody who's finding a complete stranger, is it ethically the line for that different when you cross it?
It really varies from one investigation to another, and it also varies on the intention of why you're trying to collect.
Right.
So for you, you were altruistic about it. You probably could have went a little bit further. I'm going to give you a homework assignment because military personnel tend to go to alumni sites.
Right.
And then you've got things like the Fleet Reserve Association, VFW, American Legion.
Yep.
Those are all good places to check.
Yeah.
So that would be a homework assignment for you on that. But it really depends on your intention. So within the course, I do show a case study where someone wrote an article. It's since been taken down, about how they searched for their crush for 10 years and they chronicle all the steps they took. And it's really slimy, honestly, when you like the first 14 pages of it. Okay, it's kind of cringy. Pages 14 through 20 are pretty slimy. There's a few really slimy statements in it. It could be because of a language barrier or a cultural difference, but nevertheless, with that, I did a little bit additional reconnaissance on the author of that, and they, I'm just going to say they had more CVEs to their name than they had trips around the sun. So I don't believe that I fully trust their motives and intention. I kind of feel that they may have attempted something that they didn't chronicle in the blog, because, you know, getting that many CVEs at a younger-ish age, that tends to lead to, of course, responsible disclosures, but really, you know, if we want to look at the difference between responsible disclosure and exploit development, the difference is intention, right?
Right.
It can vary. So if you're trying to find like a lost loved one or something, my recommendation to stay kind of ethically above water would be either go the letter route, although that might creep some people out. You might be better off just sending a friend request or a message on social media, if you can find it, if they have one. Don't find out that they're a member of American Legion Post 8675309 and that they meet every Wednesday at 7 p.m. and go in there with a keg and be like, "Hey, buddy, how you doing?" I wouldn't go that far. But really, it depends on why the investigation is occurring. If you're doing it to reunite loved ones, then they may not need to know things like data breach information, like passwords, for example. In past lives, when I've done investigations for businesses looking for like external risk assessments and stuff like that, I do look at the data breach information, but I typically refuse to provide like passwords on a per user basis to a company, because password reuse is too much of a real thing. And this makes me think of a conversation that I had after, I think it was the last Layer 8 conference. It was a conversation / argument on Twitter, because I was saying that ethically, for a social engineering engagement, I draw the line at personal accounts. Because I look at it from the perspective of, if my employer was doing a pen test and they authorized someone to attempt to compromise my personal email, my personal social media, they don't own that. They don't have the authority to authorize such a thing. So I would definitely be looking at throwing whatever books I could. I would probably be reaching out to people like Lawyer Liz to find out what books there are to throw at an employer for authorizing that. So, I put myself in that shoe. And with that, my employer doesn't need to know my passwords. They have the ability to reset it. They have the ability to enforce passwords that I cannot use, like, sorry for everyone that has this one, but spring 2021 ! They can prevent things like that.
Nobody listening to this podcast better have that password. I'm just saying, if you found this podcast already.
I agree. I mean, there may be some proactive people that are still in winter 2020 or winter 2021,
maybe
there could be some proactive people with summer 2021 or suns out, buns out. I mean, something to that effect.
That's mine. You got it.
I know.
I
know. You're forgetting, I am a member of the Password Inspection Agency. I do inspect passwords.
Nice.
And those of you who have seen me at conferences, I have the ball cap and the badge to prove that I am both state and county level password inspector certified. So,
Swanky.
Yeah, exactly. But the way I will structure that is I'll say, hey, here are some of the passwords that weren't so good that I found that were tied to your company's email addresses. I would recommend disallowing everyone from using those. And something I've most recently started doing is saying, okay, well, of all the breached passwords, the average length of your password is 7.2. On average, it has 2.4 typefaces, and it's been reused 6.4 times. And that is something that a company can go with. That is pretty much signed, sealed, delivered, wrapped with a nice, pretty bow, saying, here is justification for you to do some awareness training, and here's justification for you to invest in a password manager for your enterprise. And probably 2FA as well. But I tend to stop at that point. If someone comes and says, hey, I want you to go looking for this person, and I have a scoping call or a conversation with them, and they don't seem quite so altruistic, I have no problem saying no.
Do you ever have, so I mean, you give these classes to folks. Did they ever tell you it's like, well, my company's wanting to stand up some kind of, OSINT background check thing. So if we've got people we're hiring in, we're going to go and search on these people and see if they've got anything, we're going to check their social media accounts without passwords. We're going to make sure that they're a good hire or they're a good there's no liability there, or, we're not finding them on, racist or hate sites or anything like that. Do you ever get people who take your class that, are being asked by their companies to do this? Or, maybe it's a defense thing where it's like, yes, I know that my company is actively trying to make it, trying to make sure that they're monitoring my social media accounts. What can I do to defend against that? Do you get those kinds of people to take these classes?
I'm sure I have. They've just never admitted it, if that's the case. I've had some professional and private investigators take the course that I do know have that as a service that they offer. So, it kind of goes without saying that they would do that. If I had to guess, I would say most likely I have. They've just never said it. So it's definitely a possibility. There are some services out there that'll do it. Some are going to do it really well. Some are going to do it kind of ho hum, and some are going to say they do it and not so much.
Okay. Let me see. What do we have here? So, okay. So I mentioned my story. So my friend Matt, he does not have social media other than his wife, but she hadn't posted on it in a couple of years. So that's, I would have reached out to him and did a friend request that way. But I mean, even his LinkedIn was trash. So yeah.
If it's somebody you're cool with, the way I see it is, if it's somebody that I was cool with in the Navy, if I could find their phone number, I would probably be comfortable calling them. For most people,
right.
There's a few that a letter would probably be the best gesture. Right. It just varies from person to person, because if you actually know the person and you've spent time with them, you're going to know what they are comfortable with.
Right. Yeah, that's fair. Yeah. I mean, the last time I saw him was like 2003. So it was like, computers were not, we didn't have massive, Facebook, problems and issues in social media. Yeah, exactly.
MySpace hadn't even taken off yet. We were still trying to figure out how to get the optimum internet connectivity in our barracks rooms to be able to download songs off LimeWire.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And, so I think it's become easier for us to gather that information, or to pull that information up without, needing to go to a county courthouse or, involve a private investigator in this case. What I was trying to do was, not be really weird. And, the first, if somebody just called me up out of the blue, he probably wouldn't have answered the phone, but it would have been like, how did you find me? And I didn't want it to go that far south. I figured the mail was a safe option because he had the option of not replying to me. If he didn't really want to talk to me, instead of me just blowing up his phone. Hey, you didn't answer my phone call the first time. Hey, you didn't answer my phone call the second time. So yeah. But it was cool. He actually sent me a letter back, which I hadn't written a letter in almost 15 years. So my hand was all crampy after I got done with it. So it was a little odd. Yeah.
So I don't recall your rate in the Navy, but I do know that you were not on submarines, and, submariners, we're an arrogant lot of people. So I do have to ask, did you write it with a crayon?
No, I was an orographer's mate. I did have to write quite a bit as an Oh, I'm sorry, a weather observer. I was a weather observer. But
I was just going to say you weren't a Marine, so you didn't have to write it with a crayon.
No.
Well, Marines don't write with crayons. They eat.
They eat them first, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, Tom. Tom is on the board of Ms. Berlin's Hackers Health group there. Sorry, Tom.
So much crap.
Yeah. Well, I mean, absent of all the military stuff, I will say that the best Marine is a submarine, but I'll leave that at that.
Oh, wow.
Oh, there's got to be a reason for that.
There's got to be.
There's plenty of comebacks. I've been in that argument numerous times. I'll leave it right where it is to keep things PG-13.
Fantastic. Yeah. So, all right. So let's just say that my interaction with my friend Matt did not go so well, and he decided not to reply to me. You mentioned this OSINT heartbeat. I'm assuming that's a thing where, it would be where his data was stale, or that his information was not up to date. Maybe I sent it to the wrong Matt who lives in that state that just had a very similar age. And I mean, that was my thought. I was like, oh crap, I sent this a complete stranger my information. That was for about a second there. I was like, maybe I didn't do a good job. Maybe I need to double check my information. Maybe I just shared my phone number and my email address to a complete stranger who has the exact same name as this guy. So
maybe you could take the OPSEC course.
Maybe I need to take a different OPSEC course. No, I got it right. Because I had verified the past address and everything. But
giving you a hard time on that one. But yeah.
Yeah.
What is
the OSINT heartbeat in this case? Is it a making sure that data is actually up to date, or that it's fresh, or what does that mean?
To a degree, yeah. So basically, the OSINT heartbeat is an analytic structure. It's a theoretic analytic structure that I've more or less assembled probably about a year and a half ago now, for the purpose of helping to explain to students and people in general how to take a piece of open source information, OSINT, and analyze it to verify that it actually meets all of the requirements in the litmus test to be considered intelligence. So to start out with this, first we have to understand the intelligence context. The intelligence context is the ability to answer questions like, is this legal? Is this ethical? Is this within scope? How does this further my investigation? Why do I care? That's the intelligence context. And in fact, of the 4 chambers of the OSINT heart, it is the only one that's even remotely close to being a deal breaker. So with the 4 chambers, we start out, we ingest information, open source information, OSINT. So we don't know if it has an intelligence context yet. From there, we do a fidelity check. The fidelity check is where we're going to assess the data source, the quality of the data source, and our ability to corroborate this data across multiple data sources. Just because something comes from a poor fidelity data source or a poor quality data source, that doesn't mean that we just immediately exclude it. That just means that we need to proceed with caution. So kind of think of it like a TCP packet. We kind of put a flag up to say this is high fidelity, this is low fidelity, or whatever. Next, we'll assess the intelligence context. Okay, does this seem to further our investigation? Cool. From there, we ask ourselves, is this logical? Well, logic and fidelity, that sounds an awful lot alike, right? With logic, what we are doing is we are assessing, does this make sense? And the logic check is more for us than it is the information, because that's going to allow us to identify if we've fallen down a rabbit hole or if we've been chasing red herring. And it may also allow us to confront our own biases or preconceived notions based on previous information or intelligence even that we reviewed and we drew the wrong conclusion with. So we treat that one like fidelity. Logic check, yes, no, maybe. That's kind of a flag as well. And then the 4th chamber is where we either, when the heart proverbially contracts, we either send the intelligence through the workflow, which would be cycles as opposed to processes, or we could either discard any information that we know has no possible value, or we could potentially set it off to the side, store it, if you will, to reevaluate later. It could be high fidelity information. It could seem very logical, but we can't immediately assess an intelligence context with it. So it might be something where we say, this is interesting. I'm going to go see if I can collect anything else that can assist with this, and I'm going to come back later. And then from there, the heart contracts. It puts the intelligence through the workflow, which, like I said, is cycles as opposed to processes. I'm really big on the cycle versus process thing, because with cycles, they typically operate indefinitely, right? They stay enacted until something acts upon them. So that might be something where we say, like a car, for example. We start a car, we go through a process of ignition, right? It has a defined starting and stopping point. But once the car is actually started, it is now the combustion cycle. And that cycle is going to continue until we either initiate a process to shut it down, we have some sort of mechanical, electrical, or other type of defect, or we run out of gas. So OSINT's very much the same. We treat it as a cycle. So I always like to use the context of rule number 1 of improv. No matter what the question, the answer is always yes and. So you have this piece of information. Yes, and what can you do with it? Based on that information, where can you go with it? How can you further your investigation with that? And that's really a very important thing. And regarding like cycles versus processes, a process, it's a very linear thing. You have one or more defined inputs and one or more defined outputs, but there is a defined starting and stopping point. With a cycle, think of a cycle as several interconnected processes that each process has their defined inputs and outputs, but you chain them together and you continue. Whether you continue until you run out of time in a trace labs competition, you run out of billable hours as part of your investigation, you find the answer you're looking for, or you just go about your business. That's basically how I treat it, because at any time, I always like to correlate this with the whole semisonic closing time song. Every beginning is some other, every beginning is some other beginning's end. Every input to a process is another process's output. So you have process A, you give it one singular input, you get an output. That output can be either the singular input or one of many inputs to another process that's going to help you gather more information or more intelligence. So things like that. And of course, the OODA loop is part of it. I don't really get too deep into OODA loop, but I know people from like the threat intelligence background, they're going to look at OODA loops a little bit more critically than like OSINT investigators that are looking at things like the intelligence cycle, the RAND OSINT life cycle, and stuff like that.
That makes sense. Yeah. So is there any place where the process stops? If it's constantly going, where do you exit? Are there always exit points, or is it always some other thing to find, or you just run out of time and that's it? Or I mean, it's continual cycle. When does it end?
Sometimes it never does, because the nature of OSINT dealing with the live internet, right? You've got 1.54 billion people on the internet. Dropping another Letterkenny reference here, there are 1.54 billion people on the internet. These are their problems. And what that really comes to is people are continuously posting to social media. So you have casseroles and cat videos. You have people who are constantly oversharing. You have influencers. You have, the what I would consider the stupid people being made famous by social media that are just, doing dumb stuff.
How do I fall in all of those categories?
Yeah, I'm feeling attacked here. I'm feeling so attacked today.
No. There's never any attack.
My wife fragility over here.
And then you also have to factor in, especially in the United States, data is a commodity, right? So unless you live in, say, California or New York with CCPA or New York Shield laws, which are kind of like smaller versions of GDPR, there's really no recourse. Some states are better than others with that, but basically there's a whole financial ecosystem for data brokers to collect information, the Experians, the Equifaxes, the LexisNexis of the world, to be able to collect information and refine it, enrich that data, and then turn around and sell it to somebody else who may either provide that information for free, or they may add it to their own information and sell it and keep going. Even like if I did like a huge opt-out engagement where I go and I opt myself out of as much stuff as possible, I apply the gray hair theory to it, right? You find a gray hair in your eyebrow, you pluck it, a week later, you've got 5 more in its place. So you might opt out of that one piece of information, but as that information is purchased, enriched, and sold again, it's just going to pop up again. And because of that, that leads to a lot of tricky situations in finding an ability to actually find a stopping point with OSINT. I mean, you could continue indefinitely.
That was our show for this week. You can find show notes for this and all of our shows at www.breakingsecurity.com. You can also find an RSS link on the site to add to your favorite podcatcher. You can find all of us on Twitter. Miss Berlin can be found at InfoSyster, INFOSYSTIR. Mr. Betcher can be found at BetcherPwned, BOETTCHERPWNED. And you can follow me on Twitter at Bryan Brake, BRYANBRAKE. We have a Slack. Come join us on our Slack. A lot of great things going on there, a lot of channels of various InfoSec-related subjects. You can get an invite on Twitter by emailing our official Twitter handle for the show at Brakesec, BRAKESEC, or you can email us at bds.podcast@gmail.com. Thank you to all of our Patreon supporters for their monetary assistance by offsetting costs involved in putting out a weekly show. Zoom fees, Libsyn hosting, domain purchase, renewal, equipment upgrades, time and effort building the community we have. We appreciate all of your help and support. If you'd like a t-shirt, stickers, coffee mug, or just to show your support for the show, you can check out our TPub site, www.tpublic.com/user/BDS podcast. We thrive on your feedback. A quick 5-star comment on iTunes or Google Play Store or your favorite streaming service, Spotify, Pandora, what have you, go a long way to gaining us additional visibility. It takes no time at all, and we appreciate your help in spreading the word. That was it for Breaking Down Security this week. Be safe, be well, be kind to one another. Take care of yourself because you're the only you have, and we'll talk to you again soon.